across the southeast. Heading out on Friday evening, again, most places staying dry and fine. Just maybe 1 or 2 showers continuing over northwest Scotland. And they'll still maybe be around first thing on Saturday. It'll be a colder start. Temperatures well down into single figures on Saturday morning. But then a lovely day, again, if you like blue sky and sunshine. A cracking day, in fact, with temperatures up into the high teens, low 20s more widely in parts of eastern England, 23, 24 degrees Celsius. Notice, however, cloud will be increasing across southern England with the threat of some thundery showers coming up from France and affecting the Channel Islands. And they don't stop there. They're likely to drift north on Saturday night. Hit and miss, but bringing some heavy showers across England and Wales on Sunday.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there, good afternoon. Welcome to Brazier. Some fast-paced news for you from 4 until 6 today. In the next hour, a story that some people think is overblown, but it still won't go away for the government. The Metropolitan Police has issued more than 50 new fines for breaches of COVID rules in Downing Street and other government buildings. That takes the total number, if you're counting, of Partygate fines to over 100. Reaction from the red side of the House coming up. Are we on the verge of a recession? It's a question you're going to hear more and more. I suspect there are warnings we might be. After the economy shrank in March, consumers restricting spending, not least by taking fewer car journeys. I'll ask independent economist Julian Jessup whether talk of a recession might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the debate this hour was Conservative MP Lee Anderson right to claim some people are using food banks because they, quote, cannot cook properly. He's calling on those food banks to do things differently.
And at the food bank, we show them how to cook cheap and nutritious meals on a budget. We can make a meal for about 30 pence a day.
And doctors and paramedics are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patient safety. Today, we hope to hear from you if you've experienced an unreasonably long response time to a 999 call. We'd like to share your story. If we can, email gbviews@gbnews.uk. And joining me for the next hour, the editor of The Oldie, Harry Mount. But first, the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Colin, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has confirmed that neither he nor his wife have received a second fine as part of the police investigation into lockdown parties held in Downing Street and Whitehall. It follows an announcement by Scotland Yard that 50 additional fines were being issued. Boris Johnson, his wife Carrie and Chancellor Rishi Sunak were hit with a fixed penalty notice last month. It brings the total number of fines to more than 100. Boris Johnson says a strong jobs-led recovery is the single most important thing the UK must focus on. The Prime Minister is chairing a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent today. He says new laws introduced in the Queen's speech will help tackle underlying issues, including those driving up the cost of living, in particular energy.
We will continue to use all the ingenuity and compassion that we showed during the COVID pandemic. And what we're already doing, as you know, is helping people with the cost of energy, a £9.1 billion package to help people right now, £22 billion altogether, helping local councils to support families that are in particular hardship. But the crucial thing that we're doing is making sure that we steer the economy through the post-COVID aftershocks with continued high-wage, high-skill employment.
Talks will continue between Britain and the EU in the coming days in an attempt to tackle what Number 10 is describing as a serious situation over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Foreign Secretary has been holding crunch talks with the European Commission over the post-Brexit agreement today. Liz Truss is warning the EU if it doesn't show flexibility over the protocol, the UK will have no choice but to act alone. Russia's foreign ministry is warning it'll be forced to retaliate with military steps if Finland joins NATO. After decades of neutrality, the Finnish Prime Minister and its president said the nation must apply for membership without delay. Sweden is also likely to follow suit. It's after the two countries signed security pacts with the UK. Moscow claims NATO is continuing its expansion to threaten Russia. Executive Director of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, Vladimir Ashurkov, says Putin's claims simply don't stack up.
NATO is a defensive alliance. If somebody understands how decision-making process within NATO works, that is based on consensus, that it has to be a unanimous decision, people would understand that NATO would never be able to adopt a offensive stance against Russia, to attack Russia. So I think Putin just uses the issue of expansion of NATO, and he will use now the issue of Finland and Sweden.
Maddie Thomas, the 15-year-old teenager who went missing, has been found at an address in Bristol. Well, GBNews South West of England reporter Jeff Moody is live for us now in Bristol, close to where Maddie had been last seen. And what more can you tell us, Jeff?
Well, as you say, in the last hour, police have confirmed that she has been found. She was found at 12:45 this afternoon at an address in Bristol. She went missing on the 26th of April, and the fear was that she had been abducted. Well, her foster carers and her family have now been informed that she is safe. Avon and Somerset police have said they are delighted to confirm that she has been found. 3 men are now in police custody and are being questioned by officers. Now, police this afternoon have urged the public not to speculate as to what might have happened with Maddie or what state she might be in now, but to respect the family and to give them some private time for the family to be reunited with Maddie.
OK, Jeff, thank you very much. GBNews South West of England reporter Jeff Moody there. MPs warn that passport office chaos is leaving people waiting on the phone for up to 9 hours. The Home Office is facing calls to say when the backlog of applications will be cleared. It's also being urged to compensate those who've had to wait up to 10 weeks for theirs to be sorted. A Home Office minister insists the vast majority of applications are processed well within the timeframe. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, straight back to Colin.
Coming up to 4:07. Well, just as you thought Partygate and Beergate, The allegations concerning those things were starting to dampen down. Today, more fines. The Metropolitan Police issuing at least another 50 for COVID restriction breaches in Downing Street and Whitehall. It takes the total to over 100, but number 10 says the Prime Minister isn't on this latest list. They've been issued in response to a Christmas party in December 2020, which Boris Johnson did not attend. Let's ponder on this one with our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to you. We were talking during the news bulletin about the evidential bar and the decision-making process for these fixed penalty notices, and it's often in the gift of quite junior officials.
Yeah, I mean, it will be potentially someone of a rank of inspector or below that is making a decision on the fixed penalty notice, but there's no way, given just how politically charged this whole issue is, that they are not going to have oversight right from the very top in terms of actually who makes that final decision. And it may be that it's down to the Chief Constable rather than the investigating officer, who at least signs off on a recommendation from that investigating officer. But I think, like you, Colin, my heart sank when I saw this line coming through from Scotland Yard this morning. We've still some way to go on this because we have a dozen events that are being investigated by the Metropolitan Police. We got a first tranche of about 20 fixed penalty notices. Then on April the 12th, another 30. Now, this latest batch of 50, they've been actually sending these fixed penalty notices out, but not publicising the fact they've done that because of the local elections. So that's why it's such a high number at the moment. But I think there's obviously still some more to go, because it's improbable, isn't it, that the Prime Minister won't be facing more in the way of fixed penalty notices.
I tell you what, Mark, your heart might sink too if you're maybe trying to get a burglary investigated or theft of your car, and you look at this investigation into what some people feel is relatively inconsequential in terms of crime fighting. It may have constitutional and political implications, obviously, but if you're trying to get a crime investigated and you're looking at the level of police resources, you know better than me what they are. How many officers involved in this, do you think?
Dozens of officers will be involved in investigating this over the totality of the weeks and months that this is now spanning. You're absolutely right. I mean, the police want to channel their resources elsewhere. That's why the former commissioner, Cressida Dick, made it very clear. She said, we don't do retrospective fixed penalty notices. We don't start getting involved in that. She was bounced into that by effectively a Labour mayor and the Labour Party, lots of politicians, senior politicians, who wanted that investigation.
On Labour politicians, we'll be turning to Khalid Mahmood, Labour MP, in just a second, and I can guess part of what he's likely to say about this. Before we do that, Harry Mount's our studio guest for the next couple of hours. Harry, welcome to you. We'll see how your debut goes.
Yeah. All prepared to be sacked.
I mean, I introduced that note of scepticism in my introduction there. We've covered this story at length over months, and we always get an avalanche of emails saying, actually here in Bradford, in Barnstable, in Bridgend, in the Scottish borders, wherever you are, we don't give a toss about this story.
Yeah. Well, I think there are two sections of people, aren't there? Those who lost family members, quite rightly, are going to be angry with Boris forever. But I think the country at large are now fatigued by it. And my hunch is, I used to work with Boris for 5 years at the Daily Telegraph, where we called him the greased albino piglet, because he was like a creature at the Mississippi State Fair, win $50 if you catch him, and you never catch him. He always gets away. My hunch is, unless he's completely destroyed in Sue Gray's full report, is that he'll get away with it again.
How much does it matter that Keir Starmer's facing his own investigation?
Well, I think, both of you would understand the ins and outs of the two separate investigations more than most of us, but to the country at large, they'll look at it as basically as one all, won't they?
Yeah.
So I don't think they'll really distinguish between the two of them.
Interesting. I think Khalid Mahmood might take a different view. Harry, thanks very much indeed. And Mark, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's turn to the Labour MP for Birmingham Perry-Barr. That is Khalid Mahmood, to reflect on these latest fines for Downing Street. Khalid Mahmood, welcome to you. I was just making the point to our guests in the studio here that in the minds of many people now, there is a sort of jaded quality to this conversation. They feel that all politicians have behaved equally badly.
Well, this sort of issue doesn't do Parliament any good, and certainly doesn't do parliamentarians any good. But the issue, seriously, is where there were these parties arranged at work, and particularly in government offices. I think that's the crucial issue. I think Cressida Dick should, if she didn't want to investigate them, shouldn't have done that. Independent operational decisions are made by the Chief Constable, and no politician should be able to interfere in that. The simple issue would have been, when these stories came out, for Boris to say, hands up, some of these things happened, let's move forward. But look, I lost my father-in-law during COVID. And we couldn't do the things that we wanted to do because we understood clearly that was the need to ensure not just us, but everybody around us to support the legislation and the rules that were out there. And we just needed to get to that. And an honest answer in the first instance would have been helpful.
I'm sure, Khalid Mahmood, you have conversations at constituency level in the tea rooms in the Commons with other Labour backbenchers, and you've maybe discussed the thoughts, as reported, of someone like Lisa Nandy, who said just tactically, setting aside what you're saying about the obvious deep feelings there are about what people forfeited themselves during lockdown, but that tactical point that someone like Lisa Nandy makes, which is, look, Sir Keir, stop going on about Partygate, because you've got a cost of living crisis that matters more to people right now.
Well, look, first of all, the real issue here is that the Met continues to investigate these on the basis of the decision taken by the former Chief Constable. And that's where we're at. So if that news comes out, obviously Sir Keir would refer to that. But I agree with Lisa as well, that we really need to be concentrating on the cost of living, which is having tremendous effect on people's livelihood, and just the fear of how they will be able to get through the autumn with the winter closing in then. And people are really devastated, and how we're going to move forward on that.
Your leader has said he will resign if given a fixed penalty notice by Durham Police. Do you think that was... it may have been an honourable thing to do. Was it politically the shrewdest thing to do, do you think?
I think it is. And I think what we've had recently is that we get blamed for not doing what we say and doing what we legislate for. And I think in that term, bringing back Parliament into respectability and clear notice that we do have integrity and we're going to stand by our words. Somebody as the leader of the party to resign on a particular issue must be important, and therefore to give confidence to the people across the country, that's the right thing to do.
Khalid Mahmood, appreciate your time, as ever. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, the UK economy shrank by 0.1% in March. This is according to new figures from the Office for National Statistics. The statistics have fuelled new fears of a recession, with analysts blaming the cost of living and inflation as the main culprits. Asking today whether the country's going into recession and whether that process is something actually that amounts to a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fears about the economy leading to us, as a consequence, spending less, and a vicious spiral being created. Joining us now, the independent economist Julian Jessup to reflect on this. Julian Jessup, thanks for your time. Self-fulfilling prophecy. If you talk down the economy, down it goes.
Well, there's certainly a risk of that. If you get a sort of downward spiral of confidence and households spend less money and businesses invest less and create fewer jobs, then yes, you can get a situation where a collapse in confidence becomes self-fulfilling. But remember, a lot of the issues that we're talking here about are, of course, real issues, that they're not just about sentiment. It's genuinely the case that lots of people can't afford to pay their regular household bills, that energy prices are high, fuel prices are high. So there's some real things going on as well. I think the key for the government, though, is not to make those things worse in any way. And if there is something that government can do, whether directly that's on energy bills or on tax on benefits, then I think the government should be willing to act sooner rather than later, simply to make sure that that collapse in confidence doesn't actually get reflected in a big fall in spending by households and businesses.
It's not wholly in the government's gift, though, is it, in a sense? I mean, if you've got a Bank of England, an independent Bank of England, saying we're worried about inflation and therefore we're going to try and take some heat out of the economy, they're focused on inflation, the government's worried about recession, and never the twain shall meet.
Well, you're right there. There are two separate organisations there with two different jobs. I think it's absolutely right the Bank of England should worry about inflation. And if that means it has to end up raising interest rates a bit more aggressively, then I think so be it. However, it's the government's job to worry about the impact on the wider economy, and in particular on low-income households. And I think there is more that the government can do there. It's actually, to be fair, done quite a lot already. But I think, for example, it could do more on benefits. It could increase them a bit more in line with inflation. There's certainly more it can do on energy costs specifically. So, for example, removing some of the policy levies that make up a large part of bills. So there are bits that the government can do to support low-income households. But at the end of the day, it is the Bank of England's job to worry about inflation, not the government.
Julian Jessup, for now, thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. Harry Mount's alongside me to reflect on this one. You can talk down an economy to the point where people start changing their behaviour, can't you?
I think so, but at the basic level, the vital signs aren't good, are they? Inflation soaring, interest rates up, national debt huge after COVID, international war going on. And I think actually the talking down aspect isn't so powerful. I think in certain quarters, there's still this pent-up demand, isn't there, to go out. I know London is a bit of a bubble. When I go out in London, places still seem to be pretty full there, but there is a sense as you go around the country that it isn't really working very well. So even we have those areas with pent-up demand, like people want to go on holiday, then you have mile-long queues at airports which aren't working very well, and airlines which aren't working very well. So
I don't know about you, Harry. Everywhere I go, I have conversations. I did it with I was talking to a bus driver who was picking up my kids last week, and he was working unholy hours. He was 65. He was 65. We can't get anybody to drive buses, he said.
Well, that's the thing. You try and get things done, and it does feel worse than in the past, partly because of people working from home, isn't it? But there does seem to be a sort of malaise in the country, which is hard to identify in the way you can identify interest rates and inflation. But it doesn't sound good, does it?
OK. Harry, for now, thanks very much indeed. On that point, is a 5-day week in the office now effectively a thing of the past? Senior civil servants have reportedly declared that work is no longer a place as part of a pushback against government plans to get them back into the office. At a union conference held today, mandarins, that word was always going to feature in this story, wasn't it? Mandarins across a number of departments have supported motions calling for flexible working. Comes as the Minister for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency, Jacob Rees-Mogg, called for civil servants to get back to the office. Here's what he had to say, speaking exclusively to us last month.
There's certainly a place for working from home. It works in some instances. But I know that people are having difficulties getting government services, that getting driving licences from DVLA, there's a delay with some passports. We need people whose jobs are dependent on being in the office, back in the office. That the rest of the country is getting back to normal, and I'm encouraging the civil service to do the same.
Well, let's turn to the former Brexit Party MEP, Ben Habib, who has strong views on this. Ben Habib, welcome to you. I know we've talked about it before, but when we have discussed the in quotes, problem of civil servants not going back to work in the office, it's been in the context of, I was going to say, hearsay, really. The DVLA not working well, the Passport Office not working well, and stuff online, suggestions and rumours that civil servants weren't happy to go back and work in the office. This is different now. This is on the union shop floor. This is the stuff of motions and petitions and genuine disaffection. Oh. Ben Habib's microphone's not working. We'll try and fix it. And as we try and fix it, let's talk to Harry Mount. This happens, Harry, here. And this is when you earn your corn. Yeah. This is when you earn your corn. Yeah. So, go.
All right. Well, I think Jacob Rees-Mogg made a good point. There are some jobs you can do from home, some you really can't. I mean, my job as a magazine editor, obviously, throughout history, writers have been writing from home. But the editors who have now come back in, all of them in my office...
Having missed it?
Yes, I think largely, but also things were much, much slower when they were all genuinely very hard-working.
Sorry.
Rather than sending an email saying, that caption on page 46 on the bottom right, can you make it bigger? Getting an email back from just point to it on a screen. Yeah. So there are certain jobs which I think you must do in the office, and I'm sure a huge amount of those civil servant jobs must be done in the office.
And so, in so many jobs, where there's a sort of intergenerational sort of trickle down of wisdom, so much of it depends on eavesdropping, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm very grateful for the years I spent working in offices sometimes with some brilliant people, sometimes with some unmentionable monsters. But even then, it was good for me to deal with them and it takes the rough edges off yourself dealing with these monsters. So I think people should get back to work in their offices.
I do hope you get round to naming some of them in, of course, the next 90 minutes. Let's go back to Ben Habib. I think we've made his microphone work. Ben, welcome to you. We're just talking about the fact this seems real now, some of the words of dissent from civil servants. It's on the union shop floor.
It is. And, it goes back, I think, in a sense, to all the other subjects you've just been discussing about high inflation, broken supply chains, cost of living crisis, fuel prices up. When we locked down, what we did was throw a massive stone into an otherwise extremely well-balanced system, an ecosystem. And we threw lots of things out of sync. And actually working from home is one of those things that was thrown out of sync. And we do need to get the machine working as best we can now. People need to go back to the office. I run my own business, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that people work better in the office than they do at home. There's a better ethos, there's a better atmosphere, you talk to colleagues, and you're here to work. You're not thinking about perhaps making another cup of tea or perhaps just putting your feet up for 5 minutes snooze. You're actually focused. And there can be no system better than the system that evolved over centuries, that was practiced before lockdowns.
It's also got to be true as a matter of natural justice, surely, that if you are a civil service servant enjoying a London waiting, in other words, your salary is augmented by dint of the fact you have to schlep into central London. If you're no longer making that journey but staying in your house in the home counties outside the M25, why on earth are you getting a London waiting?
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably their employment contracts entitle the government to direct them to come to the office. That's a standard provision in an employment contract. My employees in my company have to work within reason from where we ask them to work. And I don't understand how it is that they're having such problems getting people to do what they're contractually obliged to do. And how can they expect the private sector to be all back in the office if the government won't lead by example, if the civil service won't lead by example? And as Jacob Rees-Mogg in the earlier clip rightly said, lots of departments aren't functioning. Airports aren't functioning properly. Try travelling at the moment. It's a nightmare. Passport issuance isn't working. DVLA isn't working properly. And if we want the supply chain to fix itself, we need every cog back in its correct position. And that includes working from the office.
As ever, good to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much. Coming up, doctors and paramedics are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having what they describe as a dangerous impact on patient safety. We'll talk to former NHS Trust Chair Roy Lilly, who'll be joining us. Back in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
£4. Doctors and paramedics are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patient safety. There's been a 77% rise in the most serious safety incidents that have been logged by paramedics, this is in England, over the last year. There's particular concern too in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, with doctors suggesting the 999 system is under what they describe as tremendous pressure. There were 551 serious safety reports filed by ambulance staff in England in the year to February 2022, up from just over 300, and that's before the pandemic. NHS England says the safety of patients is, as you'd expect them to say, their absolute priority. Let's turn to Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chairman and Health Policy Analyst, to reflect on this. Roy Lilly, thanks for your time. What's going wrong?
Hello, Colin. Well, the system is silting up, frankly. That's why. I mean, there's a combination of things. First of all, there's a huge and unprecedented demand on the 999 service. When the ambulances get to the hospital, they can't discharge the patient from the ambulance into A&E because A&E is a chock-a-block. A&E is a chock-a-block because they can't get people from A&E into a bed in the wards because the wards are chock-a-block. And the wards are chock-a-block because social services, who are primarily responsible for getting elderly, frail people home safely, haven't got any money, haven't got any staff. So the whole thing's grinding to a halt.
And we're left with a story headline which suggests that there is a fault with the ambulance service, but as you tell it, and it rings absolutely true, the problem is with that flow through the system, isn't it? And it backs up all the way from old people in hospitals not being taken into social care. That means the bed's not being freed up. That's got to knock on, as you say, in A&E, and on it goes.
Yes, I mean, it's what managers boringly call a root cause analysis. You say, we've got this problem, what is the root cause? And the root cause is the flow through the hospital has become jammed up. I mean, the paramedics are doing everything they can. My view is the seeds of this were planted in 2017. It was obvious then that the ambulance services weren't coping with just 999 calls off the back and turn up. So they came out with this category thing. There are 4 categories now. Category 1 is like life-threatening, bleeding to death, had a heart attack, stopped bleeding, that kind of stuff. Category 2, amazingly, includes stroke. Well, if you have a stroke, I think you need an ambulance pretty quick. And then there's 2 other lesser levels of importance. But I mean, they're not getting to the category 1 calls, the real life-threatening calls, as quickly as they can, and they're not getting to the category 2 calls. So they did this in 2017. Then, of course, since then we've had COVID. Everybody's forgotten what's happened, and then coming out of COVID, there's a huge backlog of people. I mean, there's 6.5 million people on a waiting list. So, and interestingly enough, just before I came on air, I noticed a press release from NHS England. They've just gone out with a contract, a £30 million contract, to contract with private ambulance providers to supplement the paramedic services where they're under pressure. But, as I've just explained, you can get as many people as you like turning up at the front door, but if you can't get them out the back door, you've got a problem.
Roy, just a quick thought. I want to turn to Harry Mount here in the studio for his thoughts, but just a thought from you on whether we will begin to see, or even whether we're seeing already, people just slightly gaming the system. I mean, it's an incredibly cynical way of looking at it, but I'm mindful that somebody said to me recently that they'd heard a story of somebody calling 999, they were worried about their child, and they said, it's not that bad, but say he's not breathing, that way you'll get the ambulance straight away. Are people gaming the system, do you think?
Well, I mean, I guess that they might be. It's always really happened with 999 services. I don't think so. I think what is happening, Colin, is that people are giving up the ambulance service, and if it's possible, they'll pick somebody up, put them in a car, and drive to A&E. And then, of course, that gives A&E an even more problem, a bigger problem, because although paramedics can sort of look after somebody in an ambulance and contain an emergency, but if you've got somebody in the back seat of your car and you say, "You've got to come and get my granny now," you end up with a row in A&E. So, I mean, this is not going well is the only way I can describe it. And there isn't an easy solution. I mean, if I could, put my finger on a solution and say, this is what we need to do, what it wouldn't be giving £30 million to the ambulance service. It would be giving £30 million to social services for them to get this thing freed up.
Roy Lilly, as ever, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. The thoughts of Harry Mount on this one, and in particular, as editor of The Oldie, you will have, I'm sure, correspondence from your readers who can recognise exactly the story we're telling.
Well, exactly. And one of the ways of kind of semi-gaming the system is, as you've just been saying, calling a cab or getting your family to give you a lift. I had a relatively minor but agonising foot injury last summer, and I knew that an ambulance would take forever, so I took a cab to the Royal Free, and just as your guest was saying, actually the care there was fantastic. A nurse saw me, a doctor saw me, good X-ray, it was all fine in the end. But these three things that together would have taken about 15 minutes were surrounded by 5 hours of waiting, and the system somewhere is broken. It's not beyond the wit of man for someone like me with a minor injury. Give me a little ticket, say, come back and see the nurse at 3:15, the doctor at 4:15, have the X-ray at 8:15, and you're not clogging up the hospital physically. So there is, I think, the systems of hospitals need to be massively reorganised.
Yeah, the problem with that might be that you'd come back, some people wouldn't. It's a universal system, isn't it?
Yes, well, if you're in agony like I was, you would come back.
Point well made. More from Harry in a moment. Coming up after the break, we're going to be asking, was the Conservative MP Lee Anderson right to claim that some people are using food banks because they, quote, cannot cook properly? He's calling on food banks to do things differently. What do you make of this one? We'll debate it in the next few minutes. First, the latest news headlines.
It's 4:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has confirmed that neither he nor his wife have received a second fine as part of the police investigation into lockdown parties held in Downing Street and Whitehall. It follows an announcement by Scotland Yard that 50 new fines were being issued, bringing the total to more than 100. The Prime Minister says a strong jobs-led recovery is the single most important thing the UK needs to focus on. Boris Johnson's chaired a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent today. He says new laws introduced in the Queen's speech will help tackle underlying issues, including those driving up the cost of living.
But the crucial thing that we're doing is making sure that we steer the economy through the post-COVID aftershocks with continued high-wage, high-skill employment.
Russia's foreign ministry warns it will be forced to take retaliatory military steps if Finland joins NATO. The Finnish Prime Minister and President announced today the nation must apply for membership without delay after decades of neutrality. Sweden is also likely to follow suit. Maddie Thomas, the 15-year-old teenager who went missing last month, has been found at an address in Bristol. 3 men inside the property have been arrested on suspicion of child abduction. Maddie hadn't been seen since she left her foster parents' home in the Southmead area on April the 26th. Scientists have announced what they call a groundbreaking Milky Way discovery, the first direct image of a supermassive black hole at the centre of our galaxy. Called Sagittarius A, the hole has 4 million times the mass of our Sun and is located about 5.9 trillion miles away from Earth. Bringing some breaking news now, and former Scottish National Party MP Natalie McGarry has been found guilty of embezzling almost £25,000. The ex-Glasgow East MP was accused of stealing between 2013 and 2015 while she was treasurer of the Women for Independence group. That's all from me for now. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Stay with us. Back to Colin in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Here with GB News, our top stories for you this afternoon. More than 100 fines have now been sent to people working in Downing Street for Partygate breaches during coronavirus restrictions. The Met Police issued another 30 today. Downing Street says Boris Johnson has not received a new fine. Finland's President and Prime Minister, they've called for the country to apply for NATO membership without delay. It follows a visit by Prime Minister Boris Johnson. We brought that to you yesterday. As he signed a new security deal with the country, Moscow said the move amounted to a threat to Russia. And doctors and paramedics are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patient safety. There's particular concern in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, with doctors suggesting the 999 system is under what they described as tremendous pressure. Next, within the last hour, it's been confirmed that the missing teenager, Maddie Thomas, has been found by police at an address in Bristol. She went missing a fortnight ago. Avon and Somerset police say 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of child abduction. Let's turn to our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, who's live for us in Southmead in Bristol. Jeff, hi to you. What can you tell us?
Well, at 12:45 this afternoon, police announced that they had found Maddie in a house in Bristol along with 3 men. She went missing on the 26th of April. She went to the shops, told her foster carers she was going to the shops, didn't return. The police launched a massive investigation. They did door-to-door searches. They also looked at CCTV cameras to see if they could get some sort of a clue as to where she was. They looked in great detail at her social media, and that's when they discovered that she had, like a lot of teenagers, lots of different accounts, lots of different profiles, some of them in different names, some of them with different pictures too, which made it much more confusing and difficult to piece the whole puzzle together. Last night, the police announced that they believed that she had been abducted, and the reason they said that is because they believed that she had met somebody at the shop, someone that she originally met online and then met in person and had gone off with them. So last night, they announced that it was a missing child inquiry. All day long, we've been reporting this. We've been talking to residents of the area in Bristol, Southmead, where she lived. Everyone has been out looking for her. But this afternoon, good news is she's been found. Now, 3 men who were found in that house have been taken into custody. They're being questioned by officers this afternoon. The police are saying that they're delighted to confirm that Maddie has been found. They're also asking that we all respect the family and their privacy at this time, and not to speculate too much as to what actually happened to her, and just allow the family to have a little bit of privacy to be reunited with Maddie after these 2 worrying weeks.
Jeff Moody reporting there from Bristol for us. Jeff, thanks very much indeed. It's time for our debate this hour. In spite of some really pretty strong and stinging criticism, the Conservative MP Lee Anderson, well, he's standing by comments that some people in the UK use food banks because, as he put it, they can't cook properly, nor can they budget properly. Karen Buck, the Shadow Work and Pensions Minister, called his view beyond belief. Mr Anderson has responded by saying, "I'm talking common sense. The left will obviously jump on this." He's a former miner, Lee Anderson. He says he understands what poverty looks like, frugality too. Our question today, is Lee Anderson right about food bank use and the way people cut their cloth when it comes to household budgets? We're going to turn to a couple of guests about that shortly, but first let's tee this one up. Harry Mount's with me in the studio. It's one of those things where you see the comments and you know there's going to be a row, and some of the stuff that will be said won't necessarily be engaging in good faith with the comments made. Nonetheless, if you're in the Whip's office, the Conservative Whips, you probably read this and thought, oh, crikey. What do you make of it?
Well, to a certain extent, I think he's right. It is true that if you were to buy a huge amount of rice and onions very cheaply, you could feed yourself more cheaply than going to fast food places. But at the same time, it's patronising for a Tory MP or any MP to say so. It's very like that famous passage in Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell in the 30s, where he says the rich middle classes are always saying to the poor, up north in this instance, you should be eating better, you should be eating brown bread, not lots of white bread with thickly pasted with butter. And he said, what you don't realise, George Orwell says this, is if you're extremely poor and having a rough time, you want treats. You don't mind spending that tiny little bit of extra spending money on treats, and you don't want to constantly live healthily. And so he's got a point about the cheapness of food, but actually it's not wise of him to say it, I think.
Yeah, he makes the point he was a former miner. Maybe if he was still a miner, he could make the point it becomes more difficult
yes,
as an MP.
Yeah.
Not that we have any miners left anymore.
No,
it's worth pointing out, lest anybody feels minded to email in with that fact. Let's ponder this then. We're joined by Benjamin Loughnane, Research Fellow at the Bow Group think tank, and Tom Pollard, who's a mental health and poverty researcher. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Tom, we'll start with you. What did you make of Lee Anderson's comments?
Well, as your guest just said there, I think it was insensitive and it was patronising. I spent time in food banks just before Christmas doing some research around why people were needing food banks, and in particular the impact on their mental health of needing to seek support in that way. And what I heard from people is that they are spending every minute of every day trying to figure out how to make ends meet. You know, this isn't something they take lightly. People don't go to food banks unless they really feel they've exhausted all other options. So the idea that people are just ending up there because they haven't thought enough about how to budget or just don't know how to cook, it just does not ring true from what I saw in the food banks I visited. I think it's also striking that, the comments about him saying that some people end up in food banks for these reasons. I mean, if you listen back to what he said there isn't really a crisis going on in this country, and the suggestion was that this was the driving force behind food bank use. But if that's the case, then why has food bank use increased so much over the last 10 years?
Benjamin Loughnane, what's your take?
Well, I don't think his comments were sort of ill-intentioned. I think he was really just saying there are other ways to help people rather than just, financially. Like, it's not just about giving people benefits or money so that they can afford more food. It's if you educate people in how to use that money or how to cook, they can use that money in a more efficient way and feed themselves. It goes back to the old adage, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, but teach a man to fish and he'll never go hungry again. I think the principle is one which is actually well established, and I don't think it's that controversial. I think what's controversial is the fact that it's a Conservative MP who said it. If a Labour MP had said it, I don't think there'd be so much controversy. I don't think people would be jumping on it in quite the same way. And if we look at what he actually said, I think it was completely well-intentioned and in no way malicious.
Or just setting aside the MP question, Tom Pollard, if this had been a celebrity chef appearing on morning TV and saying, look, ditch the fast food, cook from scratch, go for the veg from your local market, it's cheap as chips, nobody would have batted an eyelid. But I just wonder if, therefore, we're saying that it's inappropriate somehow for an MP to say this, then that seems to run slightly counter to the whole principles of democracy. If MPs can't speak their mind in a place of parliamentary privilege, then what can they do?
Well, it's about understanding context, though. So, he's a member of a party who, in government, have allowed the rate of benefits to fall in real terms over the last 10 years. We're now back to a place where benefits are at their lowest rate in real terms since the early 1990s. So this isn't about people, squandering lots of money on fast food. The reality is that people are doing everything they can to make a tiny income stretch to feed themselves and their families. And the reason we're seeing an increase in food bank use is a growing number of people just aren't able to make ends meet on that budget.
Benjamin Lockdane, there is a presentational problem for the Conservatives here, isn't there? Which is it reinforces the idea, and it may be a bogus one in the eyes of many people who know about these things, of the nasty party.
I completely empathise with that. I think it rankles when, a government which has done very little in terms of counterbalancing the cost of living crisis. If anything, the policy making has exacerbated the cost of living crisis, but that affects everyone, I think, equally. But I understand why people would say, the Conservative Party coming out saying this, that's a bit rich, isn't it? But at the end of the day, Lee Anderson is a backbench MP. He's not in government. He's not the person who's responsible for this. If you want to direct your ire at the government, feel free to do so. But taking what I think was a fairly well-intentioned comment from somebody who actually does want to help people in food banks and does actually want to help his constituents who are struggling, I think is directing that anger in the wrong place.
Benjamin Lockdane and Tom Pollard, appreciate your time. Gentlemen, thanks both very much indeed. Just a thought from Harry Mount, who's my studio guest today. I'm going to just strike hit a note that's not been hit yet in this conversation. If you sit in a pub for a bit, or maybe even if you go to a focus group, but certainly if you sit in a pub for a bit, you will hear people say, I work all day, I pay my taxes, I'm looking at so-and-so and so over there in that council house who get all the freebies, and she's got enough or he's got enough to live on. Why are they going to the food bank? Now, I'm not legitimising that remark. I'm just saying you hear it, and you hear it more than once.
Yeah. Well, I think that is unreasonable. Actually, I don't think Lee Anderson was necessarily making a party political point, but that was, do you remember George Osborne used to say it a lot. He'd talk about people getting up and going to work in the morning and seeing the curtains close in the next door flat with somebody who wasn't going out to work and living off benefits. I think that's a slightly different point, really. What I think is right, and you referred to it, is, I've forgotten her name, the very good TV chef called Jack, who does a bargain economy a cookery show.
I was waiting for a voice of mayor with the name.
Yes, anyway.
Answer came
young
down.
lady. Anyway, that's fine. She's saying go out and buy cheap.
Jack Monroe, it finally came.
It's all working. That's fine because she's suggesting these things and it's a pleasurable show. It's an element of being talked down to, which people don't like, being told what to do, particularly about something as crucial as food.
Harry, we live in a time where someone like Meghan Markle talks about her lived experience. The lived experience of Lee Anderson is he grew up in poverty, in a mining community. Does that not give him a little bit of leeway?
Yes, and that's the other thing. We can all ignore him if we want, but I just don't think it's actually very helpful, is it? I don't think anyone's actually going to listen to Lee Anderson and go, because you've told me, I'm going to go off and buy some rice and some onions and make a nice cheap dish for 55p.
You're obsessed with rice and onions. What can you make with rice and onions? We'll talk about that during the break, maybe. Coming up after that break, we'll give you the rundown of today's 5 to 5, 5 stories that we'd like to tell you about on your way home, perhaps. First, let's have a look at the weather.
Good afternoon, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Tomorrow promises hazy sunshine for the vast majority, a warmer day as well, but it won't be completely dry everywhere. There will be some patchy rain across northern Scotland thanks to a set of weather fronts that are just draping their way southwards. Now they've already brought some rain through the day today and it'll continue to track southwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening. So a little bit of rain in places, maybe even a few showers cropping up through the evening over northern England and as far south as North Wales, possibly even the Midlands. But it all tends to scoot away and across the south it generally does stay dry overnight. Temperatures holding up as well. reasonably warm night compared to recent nights, double digits in most urban areas. On to the details then for Friday, and another set of weather fronts will bring more rain to the northwest. Quite a wet day over the northern parts of the Highlands and pushing up across the Northern Isles. But through the central belt of Scotland, largely dry, fine day for Northern Ireland, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cracking day, if you like, sunshine. May start a little hazy, but plenty of blue sky by the afternoon. A bit more of a breeze blowing. It will be quite windy in northern Scotland as well. Quite a cool feel here, but elsewhere, a warmer day, more widely up into the high teens or the low 20s. 23 is possible across the southeast. Heading out on Friday evening, again, most places staying dry and fine. Just maybe one or two showers continuing over northwest Scotland. And they'll still maybe be around first thing on Saturday. It'll be a colder start. Temperatures well down into single figures on Saturday morning. But then a lovely day, again, if you like blue sky and sunshine. A cracking day, in fact, with temperatures up into the high teens, low 20s more widely in parts of eastern England, 23, 24 degrees Celsius. Notice, however, cloud will be increasing across southern England with the threat of some thundery showers coming up from France and affecting the Channel Islands. And they don't stop there. They're likely to drift north on Saturday night. Hit and miss, but bringing some heavy showers across England and Wales on Sunday.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's time for 5 to 5. We're discussing 5 things that we'd like you to know about before 5 o'clock. At 5, supermarkets across the UK have pulled dozens of chicken products from their shelves over fears of salmonella. The affected products had use-by dates of between the 11th and the 20th of May. Anyone who's purchased any of the items is advised not to eat them and return them for a full refund. 4, North Korea has ordered a strict national lockdown after confirming its first official COVID infections. State media reported an Omicron outbreak in the capital, but did not state the number of cases. You won't hear much publicly from there. At 3, a passenger without any flying experience safely landed a plane at a Florida airport after the pilot became incapacitated. This is the moment an aircraft marshaller directed the passenger down.
3 Lima Delta, roger. Try to hold the wings level and see if you can start descending for me. Push forward on the controls and descend at a very slow rate. November 3 Lima Delta, maintain wings level and just try to follow the coast, either north or southbound. We're trying to locate you.
Well, the private plane landed smoothly at Palm Beach International Airport at 2. The Royal Mail wants to... Another flying story, crikey. Wants to introduce a fleet of 500 drones to help deliver post to more remote parts of the UK. Over the next 3 years, up to 200 drones will... take to the skies, carrying post to 50 new routes. The Isles of Scilly and the Hebrides said to be in line first. And at 1, Apple says it'll discontinue the iPod Touch, bringing to an end a 19-year affair with music fans. The iPod was first introduced to the market in 2001, and it could store up to 1,000 songs. Those are 5 things you might want to know before 5 o'clock this afternoon. Let's ponder on some of them with Harry Mount, who's my studio guest today. Owner of an iPod?
I was, yeah. Well, I've still got it at home. And actually,
is that a surprise that the editor of the oldie should still be using his iPod?
Exactly. But actually, it's good because it freezes your choice. Mine must be from about 10 years ago, so it freezes your selection of songs from then. And even someone as stuck in my ways listens to slightly different music now. So it's quite interesting to get a snapshot like that. But it was obviously going to end up being defunct, wasn't it? Because it's one of the billion functions absorbed into your phone, isn't it?
I had a big clear out recently of every single CD I ever had, and there was a bit of me sort of thinking, but what if this goes the way of vinyl and I'm just throwing away a fortune? But they take up a lot of space, don't they?
They do, but they do have memories. I've got a double album CD, The Gift of Love, which on the cover of it has a tear coming down a cheek. Once on breaking up with an ex-girlfriend, I put it on for hours and burst into tears, and I can never throw that away.
This is slightly emotionally masochistic,
yes,
isn't it?
Yeah, sorry to bring this up.
Now, I'm going to give you a pick of those 5 stories to reflect on. You can either talk about how easy it is to land a light aircraft having never piloted one before, or North Korea, poor benighted North Korea. Things aren't going well there, haven't gone well there for decades, and now they've got a bad dose of COVID.
Well, I think the plane, I read it in the paper this morning, is completely gripped by it. It's amazing, as you heard in that clip, just the calmness of both of them. He's obviously extremely good, this man had never flown a plane before. But at the same time, no disrespect to him, great hero, but it strikes me that flying a plane isn't as difficult as you might think. Do you remember when head of Ryanair said all they're doing is basically, well, this is when the planes are working, they're sitting in the front and the plane...
Looking at their iPods.
Look at that, exactly. But I think I once flew in a plane with a friend who could fly, talented man, but it didn't look actually that difficult. No. I'm not saying I could have done one.
No, I mean, I'm about to say something that you won't believe and our viewers will definitely not believe, but when I was at the Yorkshire Post, our patch extended down to RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire, and I got to fly up with one of the Red Arrows, and I can't remember if I was in the back or the front, I should remember, but he at one point said, OK, you take the... And I felt like I was able to sort of point it one way and sort of do all that stuff. Clearly, I wasn't flying it. I was left with an illusion of flying. Just time for a little bit on North Korea. It's easy to mock a regime like that, and particularly the sort of panto figure of Kim Jong-un. Meanwhile, people are still being starved to death, etc., etc.
Yeah, no, it's utterly horrific. And the news was in the paper today that they're only now accepting that there have been cases of COVID, and it's one of 2 countries in the world, can't remember the other one, which has absolutely no vaccines at all. Oh. So that is a recipe for disaster, isn't it? One of the few good things we did do during COVID is keep very accurate records of who had it and who was dying.
Harry, for now, thanks very much indeed. It's just gone 5 o'clock. And coming up this hour, days after the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, announced he'd resign if he's found to have broken COVID rules. Downing Street has been slapped with more Partygate fines. Do you care? The Metropolitan Police have issued more than 50 new fines for breaches of COVID rules in Downing Street and other government buildings. Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, will bring us the latest on that. Also, what do you think of this one? I know what I think of it. Let's tell you about it. A marriage behind bars. That's what serial killer Levi Bellfield has applied for after getting engaged. The 53-year-old is waiting for permission from the governor, but should he be allowed? I'll speak to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Blexley has strong views on this. And doctors and paramedics are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patient safety. You'll hear the story of a woman whose brother died after waiting for an ambulance for over 3 hours. And joining me for the next hour, editor of The Oldie, Harry Mount. But first, we have the latest news headlines with Tamsin.
Colin, thank you. It's 1 minute past 5. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Police have issued 50 additional fines as part of their investigation into Downing Street and Whitehall lockdown parties. The Prime Minister has confirmed that neither he nor his wife have received a second fine. Boris Johnson, his wife Carrie and Chancellor Rishi Sunak were hit with fixed penalty notices last month. It brings the total number of fines to more than 100. Boris Johnson says a strong jobs-led recovery is the single most important thing the UK must focus on. The Prime Minister chaired a cabinet meeting in Stoke-on-Trent today. He says new laws introduced in the Queen's speech will help tackle underlying issues, including those driving up the cost of living, in particular energy.
We will continue to use all the ingenuity and compassion that we showed during the COVID pandemic. And what we're already doing, as you know, is helping people with the cost of energy, a £9.1 billion package to help people right now, £22 billion altogether, helping local councils to support families that are in particular hardship. But the crucial thing that we're doing is making sure that we steer the economy through the post-COVID aftershocks with continued high-wage, high-skill employment.
Talks will continue between Britain and the EU in the coming days in an attempt to tackle what Number 10 is describing as a serious situation over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The Foreign Secretary has been holding crunch talks with the European Commission over the post-Brexit agreement today. Liz Truss is warning the EU if it doesn't show flexibility over the protocol, the UK will have no choice but to act alone. However, President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, says there will be no renegotiation.
1998 Good Friday Agreement that brokered peace after years of life-threatening troubles is law. All legal agreements to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland while protecting the integrity of the European Union single market must be respected. And renegotiating the protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland is not an option for the European Union.
Russia's foreign ministry is warning it'll be forced to retaliate with military steps if Finland joins NATO. After decades of neutrality, the Finnish Prime Minister and its president said the nation must apply for membership without delay. Sweden is also likely to follow suit. It's after the two countries signed security pacts with the UK. Moscow claims NATO is continuing its expansion to threaten Russia. Executive Director of the Anti-Corruption Foundation, Vladimir Ashurkov, says Putin's claims simply don't stack up.
NATO is a defensive alliance. If somebody understands how decision-making process within NATO works, that it's based on consensus, that it has to be a unanimous decision, people would understand that NATO would never be able to adopt a offensive stance against Russia, to attack Russia. So I think Putin just uses the issue of expansion of NATO, and he will use now the issue of Finland and Sweden.
Former Scottish National Party MP Natalie McGarry has been found guilty of embezzling more than £25,000. The ex-Glasgow East MP was accused of stealing from two pro-independence groups. McGarry embezzled £21,000 while Treasurer of Women for Independence and over £4,000 while Secretary of the SNP Glasgow Regional Association. Maddie Thomas, the 15-year-old teenager who went missing last month, has been found at an address in Bristol. 3 men inside the property have been arrested on suspicion of child abduction. Maddie hadn't been seen since she left her foster parents' home in the South Mead area on April the 26th. A Labour MP has told GB News she suffered sexual harassment whilst at Cambridge University. Stella Creasy said she was threatened with gang rape, but college authorities admonished her complaints instead of punishing the abusers. The university has apologised for what it's called a horrific ordeal, saying steps have since been taken to improve reporting incidents of abuse.
I was in a room with them all and they threatened to gang rape me. It took public humiliation and posters and finally other people coming forward and me collating the evidence of all the notes, the spitting in my room, the rubbish that was thrown at me, the sexual abuse and harassment if I tried to walk into the bar that came from this group of young men.
Well, you can watch the full exclusive interview with Gloria De Piero on the GB News website. This is GB News. I'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, it's back to Colin.
Got an extraordinary story, I think it's an absolutely extraordinary story coming up in the next 10 minutes about the convicted killer Levi Bellfield, who's reportedly gone down on one knee in prison to a prison visitor. And they're now engaged. He wants to be married. This is a man serving a long, long stretch for murder. We'll be talking to a former detective superintendent at the Met who's got some very strong views and opinions on that story. Staying with the Met, very different kind of story. The Met Police has sent out another 50 new fines to Downing Street and Whitehall for breaches of COVID restrictions. Number 10, confirming the Prime Minister isn't on that list, nor his wife. It's believed the fines relate to a Christmas party which took place in December 2020 that Boris Johnson did not attend. I'll get the thoughts of my GB News colleague and Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson now, who joins us with his thoughts on this one. Calvin, welcome to you. You've seen the emails. I get the emails from viewers and listeners saying, we're not interested. There's a cost of living crisis. Move on.
Absolutely. I'm with the viewers on this, not just because of the cost of living crisis, but before I get to why, I think it's important to stress that the PM and his wife have not been fined in this extra bundle of fines. And there is a orchestrated attempt by the mainstream media and a lot of Remainers in Parliament to take down the Prime Minister over this, I think, is quite clear. But what is more important about this is that the decision makers and the implementers of these policies did not think that the measures were serious enough. They did not think they were life and death threatening enough to follow the rules themselves. I think we need to bear that in mind. But the more and more that the mainstream media pumps this article, pumps this story at the moment, tells me to look elsewhere. What are we being distracted from? And of course, over the last few days, we've had the Pfizer data drop that Pfizer wanted to hide for 75 years. We've seen that actually the vaccine that was promoted as 95% effective is actually 12% effective only for the first few days and drops to less than 1% effective after a week. We've seen in the data drop that there may be potential harm to unborn babies that Pfizer were aware of. And all of this is being covered up by mainstream media pumping this obsession with whether the Prime Minister had a cake or not. I think it's abhorrent. And we've seen, Dominic Cummings has been talking today, suggesting that the Prime Minister and the mainstream media made deals and there were bundles that were given to the media to support COVID relief bundles that were given to support them in order to get their support and encouragement throughout. So what happened to the free press, I would like to ask.
Well, Calvin Robinson, you posed that question. I'll take it and give it to my guest here in the studio. Calvin, thanks very much indeed. Harry Mount's editor of The Oldie, journalist of many years standing. There is always when...
And it's almost impossible to find the editor who will exactly get the pulse of the nation. I did have one or two editors who were brilliant at knowing what would be popular the next day. And you can tell to a greater extent now from the amount of clicks online what people are interested in, but you're never going to please all the people all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting, the sort of data-driven journalism, isn't it, that the data edits rather than actual human beings. Peter Blexley's joined us, and Peter, thanks for coming. And we're going to talk to you about the story you're here to talk about in just a second. But first, I want to go back to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's on Humberside today, to reflect on that Beergate, Partygate story. Hi to you, Darren. Calvin Robinson was making the point that the problem for some of our viewers and listeners is that when we rattle on about Beergate, we're not rattling on about other things.
No, this is true, and it is, and it's clear, isn't it, Colin, from
what we've seen with the local election results, that clearly this is not a massive, major issue for lots and lots of people up and down the country. It's fair to say that the cost of living crisis has been the main driver of what we saw when people turned out to the polls. I think it's also, though, wrong to kind of fundamentally dismiss this as a story, in the sense that clearly the rules, whether you agreed with them or not, were pretty harsh. They meant that we all had to change the way that we lived, the way that we actually functioned as a society. The government at the time were pleading with us to follow them, suggesting that if we didn't, we were putting people's lives at risk. And so is it a major story that those at the heart of government, those working in and around the Prime Minister, on somewhat of an industrial scale, felt that they could break those rules, not adhere to them? In the Metropolitan Police have now issued over 100 fines. That number is going to go up. They are not finished with their investigation. And I think it does boil down to, again, what was happening inside Number 10? Where was the leadership? Who was taking responsibility for this, if it was mainly junior civil servants? But also a bigger, wider question about the rules themselves, that if these rules were so important, if they were genuinely to protect people's lives, why did the people who had drawn up the rules at the heart of government feel that they were not that necessary, that they felt that they could break them with impunity? And I think, again, it boils down to this sense of trust, a sense to a degree, Colin, I would say, about hypocrisy too. And I think for many people up and down this country, and this has not got to do with politics, it's not Conservative or Labour, because we know Keir Starmer's in his own mess over this. It's about this sense that it was one rule for those in charge and another rule for the rest of us. In the end, if we had done what they have done, we would have been fined and potentially have seen rather large fines. They are now seeing this, but that is only because people have campaigned and investigated the Met into carrying out these investigations.
Darren, thanks very much. And Darren McCaffrey there in Hull for us today. The serial killer, Levi Bellfield, is hoping he'll be allowed to get married behind bars. The triple murderer is serving 2 whole life sentences. He's doing that at HMP Frankland in County Durham. The prison's minister, Victoria Atkins, has confirmed that the killer had the right to have his application to wed considered. But a Downing Street spokesman says Boris Johnson was, quote, sickened and appalled by the murderer's request, and his thoughts were with the families of those killed. Let's turn to the former Scotland Yard detective, Peter Blexley. Peter, welcome to you. Thanks for coming in. What did you make of this?
Levi Bellfield has challenged my thinking on capital punishments for years and years. I've always been against it. But Bellfield's crimes are so abominable, and he is such a vile and essentially pathetic bullying monster, that the thought of him being allowed to have a marriage in prison is galling. And I fear that there is some legislation that will kind of back up his right to do that.
Article 12 of the Human Rights Act.
Yes, and I think the Marriages Act also applies to prisoners. And perhaps he may get funding to pursue this to the nth degree. I hope he doesn't. I don't want vast sums of public money being spent on some appeal after appeal after appeal through the judicial system. He's a monster. He shouldn't marry. And fortunately, the only light at the end of the tunnel is that he's going to rot and die in jail.
You've seen some, as part of your work, the work that detectives do on our behalf, and we forget to thank them for the work they do, but you deal with the scrapings of humanity. Why was he so particularly vile?
Because of the nature of the crimes. He preyed on young women, and of course Millie Dowler was just a child when he abducted her and murdered her. He preyed on the vulnerable. He went out, he would carry out reconnaissance of areas and women. And so when they were at those moments when he thought he could strike, he could strike. And I'm so delighted that you mentioned the detectives, because if it weren't for the brilliance of Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, now retired, and the team that he led, and the painstaking work that they did, they would never have potentially found Bellfield, and certainly not been able to convict him of Millie's murder. And also, I have to mention the utterly heroic Kate Sheedy. She was a young woman, again, on her own, that Bellfield tried to murder, and he left her with horrific injuries. She spent weeks and weeks in hospital, and 4 years later, courageously walked into the witness box at the Old Bailey to give so much of the evidence that led to Bellfield being convicted.
The Sun newspaper is reporting that the woman he's betrothed to now, I can't hardly believe we can sort of put it that way, a visitor, regular visitor, been visiting for a couple of years, they've been writing, physically visiting, and he went down on one knee in the visitor reception centre. I mean, clearly prison governors have got a very difficult balancing act. They've got to keep the peace, usually presumably without enough prison officers to do that. And they've got people who are obviously a menace to their prison officers and other prisoners as well. So you've got this constant balance to strike between, you know, keeping people content and keeping the lid on these obvious pressures. But it still seems pretty unfathomable that this man, Levi Bellfield, could be allowed to get down on one knee and propose marriage.
Yes, I suspect he took the staff that were overseeing that visit by surprise. But you're absolutely right. It is a balancing act. There has to sometimes be compromises in order to keep the peace when you are talking about the very worst of humanity who are locked up together. I have sources at Frankland and I hear stories about Bellfield almost trading on his inevitable notoriety and strutting around and preening himself and thinking that he's almost like cock of the walk. Well, he most certainly isn't. He remains an utter abomination, a monster and a pathetic individual. And I sincerely hope that whatever can be done by the authorities is done to prevent this marriage from ever happening.
Harry Mount, any thoughts?
Well, I agree with Peter. He's obviously a completely disgusting monster, and may he rot in jail. At the same time, I'm afraid I think he should be allowed to get married. I don't really like talking about the rights to marry, but looking at it the other way around, should the government really intervene with people's choices about who they marry? So even though he's a disgusting individual, I wouldn't like the government having the right to stop anyone from marrying.
OK. Gentlemen, thanks for your thoughts. Sensitive subject. Peter, thanks for coming in. Thank you. Now, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has threatened energy companies with a one-off windfall tax if they don't invest enough in projects to boost the UK's energy security. He said that no options were off the table as he refused to rule out the measure that Labour, the Lib Dems and the SNP have all called for, despite the government arguing that such a tax could deter investment that it wants to see in the UK's energy infrastructure. Let's turn to Angela Knight, the former CEO of Energy UK. Angela, just in terms of that introduction, Energy UK, the organisation did what? Spoke for who?
OK, so the organisation was brought together 2014, 2015 to represent the energy producers and suppliers in this country. So the members are those who you would buy your gas and electricity off, but it's also those who generate particularly the electricity, the power generators, whether it's offshore, whether it's onshore wind, or whether it's the more traditional power, which we get from nuclear and which we get from gas. What it doesn't do is it doesn't represent those who drill the gas in the North Sea. So those
important distinction.
Are not part of its
thank you.
membership.
But thank you for that. In terms of those who do the drilling, who are being pilloried far and wide from different parts of the political spectrum, do you? I mean, clearly we all understand where that opprobrium is coming from. Are you uncomfortable with the idea of, regardless of who the government is, any government saying we accept it when the bad times roll and you have problems in Russia, you have problems when an oil field doesn't deliver and you lose money and that's just tough, that's just business. But then when the good times roll, whatever the reason is, we're going to act in bad faith, you could argue, and take your profits.
It is an uncomfortable situation, actually, and I think that you raise perfectly valid points, and they are the real points, that if a company thinks that by doing its normal business, which means that some years it has bad years and other years it has good years, if by doing its normal business it can suddenly get an extra tax placed on it, then it doesn't say to them, that's a secure environment in which you should do business and which you should invest. So it does put these big question marks. We have, however, a pretty well long-term record, dare I say it, of saying to those who extract oil and gas from the North Sea, you have to pay more into the UK economy. And that's why that they pay as corporation tax on their profits something like twice what the rest of the companies do. It stands at the moment at 40% for the North Sea. It's around 20% for most businesses in this country. So already they're paying more. However, if today you were sitting around the board table of a major company that is taking out oil, that is taking out gas, and is seeing a quite extraordinary situation developing, both as far as you're concerned and the price of the commodity that you're selling, as well as all the countries, or most of the countries of the world now, being affected by what has happened when one of the largest energy producers has invaded one of the largest food producers in the world. You're looking at that, you're looking at what you're doing, and you will be saying, I wonder if I am going to be asked to do more. And the balance of doing more is either make us, the UK, more secure and quickly for our energy, which in the short term means just getting more gas out, or if you don't do that, and they've already got big investment programs in anyway, if you don't do that, as I understand the government mantra now is, then we reserve the right to come back at you and say, you have to contribute more in some way. So to me, I would say, contribute in getting as much gas as you can out as quickly as you can, because we've got a few years where we will need that gas at a reasonable price, because we are on this transition to wind, and the transition nobody has paid enough attention to. So you do that. And meanwhile, as far as the UK is concerned, we've got to get up to speed with our nuclear and get up to speed with other forms of power generation. And the poorer elements of society, we pay for them, I'm afraid, out of general taxation, because we do need to do something for quite a significant section of society to whom these bills and other bills are very, very significant.
Angela Knight, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Just time for a quick thought from Harry Mount. Confiscating the profits of privately owned companies, it doesn't sit comfortably in this part of the world, does it?
I don't think so. I'm very anti-windfall tax, essentially anti-business. And Shell are quite within their rights to move. In fact, they moved their offices from Holland to England last year. If they wanted to, if they're really whacked with the big tax, they could move to, say, Ireland, which, because of its very beneficial tax regime for businesses, has done very well in recovering from the crash of 15 or so years ago. So I think it's extremely unfair, really. No one was suggesting the government should help out Shell when it fell to a massive loss under COVID and its share price halved. So it's a bit unfair to say, when you're down, we won't help you. When you're up, we'll take billions off you.
Yeah, it feels like it's coming, though, I have to say.
So, yeah.
Harry, thanks very much indeed. Coming up, we will be reflecting on doctors and paramedics who are warning that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patients' safety. I'm going to be speaking to the sister of Lee Gannon, who died after he had to wait 3 hours for an ambulance after developing breathing problems. We'll tackle that story in a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GBNews.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is 26 minutes past 5. There's a warning from paramedics that long waits for ambulances across the UK are having a dangerous impact on patient safety. In February this year, for instance, Lee Gannon developed breathing problems at his home in Beachmount, West Belfast. His parents dialed 999 at 20 past midnight. That was on February the 15th. But in spite of calling the ambulance service 5 times, it took over 3 hours until paramedics finally arrived. His family are seeking answers, as you might well imagine. Joining me now is Lee's sister, Colin Gannon. Colin, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. And thanks for reliving this. It's an important subject, as we've been trying to ventilate it in the last hour, because obviously ambulance delays affect everybody to some degree if you're calling 999. But in your brother's instance, the effects were tragic.
Yeah. It's just a nightmare. He was only 25 and it really shouldn't have happened to him. I mean, 5 calls and then an ambulance to turn up after. I mean, it's not right.
Colin, did you tell us about his overall health? Did he have a chronic condition?
He had problems with his stomach at Christmas time and he wasn't able to keep any food down. So Lee had a procedure done at Christmas where a balloon goes down and it deflates your stomach to let food go in, but it didn't work. So he was sent home with food supplement drinks. But Lee had an appointment the day after he had died to get it done again to try and get it to work.
And how did that... I mean, OK, so that's a sort of gastric problem. How did that then become a respiratory problem?
An infection had set in and it had went up into his lungs and it had caused pneumonia.
So actually, by this stage, he had pneumonia?
Yeah, that's what the cause of death was.
Yeah. It's just, small hours of the morning. People aren't always thinking straight at that time. I suppose some of our emergency services are a bit more stretched than they might be. But to call 5 times and not get the answers you wanted. I mean, take us through some of the calls. Who was making them? What was the response? What was the excuse that you were getting?
Mum dialed the first call at 18 minutes past 12 because Lee had a shortness of breath. They had said, look, we'll get there as quick as we can. There was another call made at 12:30 just for an update. And they said really the same thing. There was a call made at 1 minute past 2 to say that he was hallucinating and he was really disorientated. And they said, look, we're trying everything we can to try and get 1 hour as quick as we can for you. And then the next call was 20 to 4 and Lee had went into cardiac arrest. He had stopped breathing. Oh. And then 2 minutes later, an ambulance had arrived. But they done CPR, they done everything they could, but there's nothing they could have done for him.
And it's one of those situations where, I mean, the human reaction is to think, well, if only we'd bundled him in the car and driven ourselves.
Yeah. We were advised actually not to because of the way he was. So, and we didn't have a family car at the time either. So It would have been hard to get him there, but we were told like somebody would be there. And then that was too late.
Do you have any sense of what was happening, with the 999 call handlers, but also was it a problem with an ambulance being diverted to another call? There's another side to this story from the ambulance service, and we'll try and get their side of the story in the fullness of time. But do you know what was the problem, do you think, from what you understand?
There was just lack of ambulances there. There were going to Category 1 calls first, and Lee wasn't a Category 1 until the last call to say that he had stopped breathing. So that's what the problem was.
I mean, this is part of the problem, Colin, isn't it? I mean, obviously, they've got to triage patients on the basis of what they hear on the end of the phone, and they are going to prioritise certain patients ahead of others. But you or your mother, whoever's making the call, you're not a paramedic. You're not trained to see where this can go. You're just reporting what you're seeing, aren't you? And at that first call just after midnight, it wasn't necessarily that serious.
Yeah, that's true. It's tragic.
I'm sure you've talked to people since the events of that night, those early hours of the morning. Are you coming across people who say it was a time of year problem, it was a time of day problem, it was just overnight, or that it's a systemic problem? There just aren't enough ambulances to go around in West Belfast?
There's just not enough ambulances to go around. There's not enough staff. I don't personally blame the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service. I understand the NHS is under an awful lot of pressure, but I mean, our loved ones are dying as a result of this.
Have you had an apology?
Yeah, we have, yeah. We did. We met with the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service, who have carried out a report now, and they have said sorry. Yeah.
Colin Gannon, we appreciate you sharing your thoughts today and your story, and our sympathy, obviously, to you and your family. Thanks very much indeed. Colin Gannon there.
Thank you.
Harry Mount is with me in the studio. It's one of those things, isn't it, where if you knew what was unfolding, you'd behave differently, but she's not a paramedic, her mother's not a paramedic. What do you do?
Well, my condolences to the Gannon family. It does sound like systemic failure. I mean, I know Belfast quite well. It's not a big city. It's not difficult to get around, particularly at that time of night. And obviously, I don't know the particular circumstances, but I'd have thought Belfast at midnight, it's not going to be very busy. So it purely is down to what Miss Gannon must have said. There just aren't enough ambulances, so there is a systemic failure.
And we don't know what was going on. We don't know what was on the roster of calls that particular night, but there will be people, I'm sure, thinking what maybe you're thinking and I'm thinking, which is after midnight, there's people making calls because they're drunk on the streets and falling over, and that gets in the way.
Yeah.
Harry, thanks very much indeed. We'll be taking you through the news bulletin now. Tamsin.
Thank you very much, Colin. It's 5:33. Here's the latest from the newsroom. The Prime Minister has confirmed that neither he nor his wife have received a second fine as part of the police investigation into lockdown parties held in Downing Street and Whitehall. It follows an announcement by Scotland Yard that 50 new fines were being issued, bringing the total to more than 100. Tackling the global cost of living pressures was top of the agenda at the Cabinet meeting today. The Prime Minister chaired the meeting in Stoke-on-Trent. He told his Cabinet to use ingenuity and compassion to help people through the difficult aftershocks of COVID and inflation, particularly focusing on cutting the costs of energy.
But the crucial thing that we're doing is making sure that we steer the economy through the post-COVID aftershocks with continued high-wage, high-skill employment.
Russia's foreign ministry warned it'll be forced to take retaliatory military steps if Finland joins NATO. The Finnish Prime Minister and President announced today the nation must apply for membership without delay after decades of neutrality. Sweden is also likely to follow suit. Former Scottish National Party MP Natalie McGarry has been found guilty of embezzling more than £25,000. The ex-Glasgow East MP was accused of stealing from two pro-independence groups. McGarry embezzled £21,000 while Treasurer of Women for Independence and over £4,000 while Secretary of the SNP Glasgow Regional Association. Scientists have announced what they call a groundbreaking Milky Way discovery, the first direct image of a supermassive black hole at the centre of our galaxy. Called Sagittarius A, the hole has 4 million times the mass of our Sun and is located about 5.9 trillion miles from Earth. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Stay with us. Colin Brazier will be back in just a moment.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.22 to the dollar. The pound is 1.18 to the euro. And the price of gold currently stands at £1,504.28 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're with GB News, you're with Colin Brazier on TV, online and on digital radio. Our top stories this afternoon: the serial killer Levi Bellfield is hoping he'll be allowed to get married behind bars. The triple murderer is serving 2 whole life sentences at HMP Frankland in County Durham. The prison's minister, Victoria Atkins, says the killer had the right to have his application considered. More than 100 fines have now been sent to people working in Downing Street for Partygate breaches during coronavirus restrictions. The Met Police issued another 50 today. Downing Street says Boris Johnson has not received a new fine. And former SNP MP Natalie McGarry has been found guilty of embezzling almost £25,000. The court found that she took the money while she was treasurer of the pro-independence group Women for Independence between 2013 and 2015. Now, aren't you sick of paying for the royal family? So asked one of my guests yesterday, and perhaps you agree with her. I do not. I think the monarchy has been responsible for some terrible things over its 1,200-year history in this country, but in its modern incarnation is a force for stability in times of unprecedented change. But is it value for money? The first thing to point out is that Britain is full of incredibly wealthy people, billionaires whose names you've never heard of, and who are quite happy to keep it that way. Members of a global elite who breathe the same air as you and I, but in every other way may as well belong to a different species. Plutocrats and oligarchs whose lives are one long helicopter ride from party to party, from gated estate to private beach and back again. There are philanthropists among them, of course. Many, at the very least, pay a lot of tax and employ a lot of people, even if it is just to drive the Range Rover or steer the yacht. But none of them lead lives which, from the moment of their birth, are geared, as royal lives are, to the service of others. Hundreds of public engagements every year at which they smile, shake hands, exchange small talk. It's not driving a delivery van or staring at a wall in a call centre, but it's work of sorts, work they choose to do, work that many wealthy people would sneer at, frankly. And in the course of that work, they give us pageantry. We saw it on display this week in Parliament. The pomp and circumstance, the costumes and liveries, the swords, the tabards. What's it worth? It seems almost crude to put a figure on something so bound up with the history of our country, but others have done that for us. One analysis this year puts the value of the British monarchy at £67 billion. A lot of that figure is tourism, and much of it is intangible. Take a Netflix phenomenon like The Crown. Until recently, it was the most expensive TV show ever made. It creates jobs and wealth, customers and viewers, because it taps into, indeed relies on, a global fascination with our royal family. How do you put a value on soft power like that? Well, my guest yesterday said none of this mattered. All it did was the reported £85 million cost of the royal family. This is a figure, by the way, which ignores where the sovereign grant comes from. It comes from the Crown Estate, property once owned by the royals but handed over to the state on the understanding that its income would help pay for the running costs of the monarchy. The royals are, to a great extent, in effect, self-funding. Now, this stuff matters. The Queen is in the twilight of her reign. An army of abolitionists has been waiting for their moment to strike. They believe their time will come when King Charles III takes to his throne, and these financial arguments, advanced with no respect for the facts, will be a big part of their attack, which is why I encourage you, I implore you, all of you who feel goodwill towards the royals, all of you who accept that there are good kings and bad, but who feel in your bones that the institution itself is worthwhile, to arm yourself with the numbers. Start with this one. When you next hear a Republican carping about the cost of royalty, ask them how rich they really are. In a country of footloose billionaires, where do the Windsors fit in? Where do you think they fit in? Have a look at the rich list. Look for the Queen's name on it. The top 10, surely. Do try again. She comes in at 372. The royals are rich, obviously. They have money, but they also have a sense of noblesse oblige. They know that it is an accident of birth that has left them so advantaged, and it's left them determined to live a life of public service. Britain is full of people wealthier than they are who have no such interests in you or I. That's the Brazier angle. Harry Mount, editor of The Oldie, is alongside me, who's just said he couldn't agree more, but you're here to sort of disagree a little bit.
Oh, right, okay.
It would be helpful.
I'll try to, yes. Well, it's incredibly cheap. That's just over £1 each, isn't it, a year for all the British subjects in the country paying for the monarchy. And as you say, actually, that money, the sovereign grant, is only a small percentage of the money that is due to the royal family on the back of their vast estates they've owned forever. But I can understand why people are Republicans. I'm not. I adore the Queen and I'm a fan of the monarchy. It's completely understandable to be anti the monarchy. But the financial line, I don't think, ever works, because 85 million quid in the scheme of things is not very much.
Well, even my guest yesterday was saying, you know, well, I get that they bring in, and the figure she quoted, I can't confirm it, was £19 billion. Right. And she said, well, you know, the buildings alone would do that. Buckingham Palace doesn't need the royals in it to attract tourism, to which I scratched my head and thought, oh, but it does.
It does. And actually all those places like National Trust, country houses, people are always much more interested in them if the Duke of Whatnot is still living there. So I think the political argument is understandable, but the financial one just doesn't stand up. And would they really prefer a President Tony Blair or a President David Beckham?
A President Sturgeon, maybe in Scotland.
President Sturgeon. And the costs of a presidency, I imagine, would be as much as, if not more than, 85 million quid.
Harry, thank you. American scientists seem to have proved that Gulf War syndrome exists and have found an apparent cause. The syndrome seemed to affect thousands of veterans who fought to eject Saddam Hussein's forces from Kuwait in the First Gulf War, the 1991 conflict. Sarin gas has been suggested as the culprit. It was released into the air when caches of Iraqi chemical weapons were bombed. The gas is usually deadly, but was diluted, according to the American researchers, and so, as a consequence, did not prove fatal. Symptoms of the condition include fatigue, memory problems and at times chronic pain. Joining me is a Gulf War veteran as well as a chemical weapons expert, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, to ponder on this one. For years, it was a bit like one of those sort of ME conditions. You got people who would say it's very real. You get other people who'd say it's all in the mind. It wasn't in the mind, was it?
No, not at all. And this sort of bittersweet moment, I think, for veterans. Sadly, over the last 31 years, a number of people have died. Friends of mine have died from Gulf War syndrome, and there are many who are still suffering. So hopefully this report gives them some hope that the US and the British governments will look at it seriously and take its findings and then support those veterans who are still suffering. I served in a tank regiment in the first Gulf War, and a number of times our chemical sensors went off for sarin. We sort of thought that it was probably just a mistake or a false reading, but actually, it now seems plausible that there were low levels of sarin around. And even in 1997 rather, at a congressional hearing, there were a lot of people who were suggesting that Saddam Hussein actually used those chemical weapons against us. So the fact, I think it was a bit strange that it was sarin that has caused this, but it seems plausible. And let's hope now the UK government and others take this really seriously and give some reparations to those who suffered defending this country and defending the rights of others in Kuwait.
And Hamish, it will seem to some of our viewers and listeners, it does certainly seem to me that there are calls for public inquiries into lesser scandals. And I use the word advisedly. I think this is a scandal. If you've sent men and women off to fight for their country and this is a consequence of being sent there to defend us and defend our interests, then that compensation ought to be framed in the context perhaps of a wider inquiry that gives them answers as well, so long as any compensation didn't come from the budget of the MOD. And I suspect and worry that it might do at a time when it needs every pound for the nation's defences.
Well, that's absolutely true. And us veterans, we're not after handouts. We're just after support when we need it. The men and women of this country have marched to the drum, for time immemorial, and we're always happy to get out of the trench and fight the enemy. But we do that on the assurance that the state, the country will look after us if we get injured and look after our families if we get killed. And hopefully everybody is really getting a taste of that now in Ukraine, which is a similar situation. The Iraqis invaded Kuwait back in 1990 as the Russians have invaded Ukraine. And we're supporting the Ukrainians to get those Russians out as we did back in the day. So I'm sure 99.9% of people in this country, support us and would want us to be sorted exactly the same as your previous topic on, the monarchy. Absolutely something that we should support with all our, with all that we can.
Hey, Mr. Bretton-Gordon, we have to leave it there. We're pressed for time, but thanks for yours. Now, an animal rights group has called for a number of traditional nursery rhymes to be rewritten to be more animal-friendly. The acronym that matters here is People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, I'm never quite sure how to say it. They're claiming that the nursery rhymes are outdated in their current form. One of the rhymes they have modified is Bar Black Sheep. The vegan-friendly version runs as follows. Harry Mann, do you want to say these words for us? You'll do it better than me.
Why not? Yeah. Well, where I can't see it. Oh, yeah. A bar black sheep. Can I have your wool? No, sir, that's not cool. Bar black sheep. Can I have your wool? No, sir, it's my wool.
That doesn't scan, does it, at the end?
Completely.
Let's discuss this. PETA's Media and Communications Manager, Jennifer White, and the farmer and broadcaster, Gareth Wynne-Jones. Thanks to you both. Jennifer, you've already succeeded. We're talking about this.
Yes, thank you so much for having us on. I would just like to make clear, we're not the PC police. We're not trying to have the original nursery rhymes banned. But, the way, our perceptions of how we see animals has changed so much over the past 100 years, which is when a lot of these nursery rhymes were written. So all Peter's doing is coming up with some modern, more relevant rhymes, for 21st century children, because a lot of the original ones they do reference animal cruelty, and they do have these negative depictions of animals. So if we have the chance to tell children kinder stories, then why wouldn't we take it?
OK, Gareth Wyn-Jones, you're holding it back. Go on.
How misleading are these people? Absolutely unbelievable. Have they got any idea what they're going to be telling children? Because the worst thing you can do to that sheep is not shear the wool off its back, because that is going to cause it the most horrible death that you could ever occur. So let's get things straight. Let's get children to understand that wool is a fantastic and amazing product that is produced every year by the sheep. And for me, I shear them sheep to make sure that the little fly doesn't lay his eggs, and then maggots then will eat that sheep alive. So Petter, come on, get off your high horse and start telling the truth.
Well, the truth is... Sorry. Sorry, Colin, on you go.
No, go on. You've just got... Quickly.
Well, I was going to say the truth is that PETA has released dozens of exposés across 4 continents, including the UK, into the sheep shearing industry, and it revealed rampant abuse to sheep, including them being punched in the face, their heads slammed into the ground.
I tell you what, guys, we're out of time. Gareth, I think you should invite Jennifer for a visit to your farm, and you show how farming really works. Thanks both very much indeed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yorkshire's crown as the, wait for it, lobster capital of Europe is under threat after the sudden deaths of thousands of crustaceans. The county, God's own county as it should be known, home to the top 3 spots for lobsters. That's Bridlington, followed by Scarborough and Whitby. In the past 7 months, thousands of dead lobsters have been found on the beaches of North Yorkshire. What on earth is going on? Pat Ford is a Scarborough fisherman, over 30 years' experience. It's just stepped through. Pat, you're on the telly. Come and speak to us and tell us what's going on with the lobsters. Pat.
Well, this all started on the 2nd of October. Near Teesside was thousands of tonnes of crustaceans washed up. It made its way right down the coast, right down to Scarborough, and all us fishermen got together and said, what's happening? But we found out on the 25th of September to the 4th of October, we started dredging the Tees Bay. And we're putting all these chemicals, dredging it and taking it out to sea. So we had meetings with DEFRA, MMO, and all the other sea fish people over 3 months, and we came to the conclusion that they said the problem is it's alga bloom. We said, what do you mean alga bloom? We've never seen alga bloom. I've been fishing for over 30 years. I haven't seen alga bloom. Well, that's the cause of it. Get on with your life, get on with your fishing, tough luck. 3 weeks ago, the wash-up started again. We started dredging again, the Tees Bay. It's all happening again. Dead lobsters, dead crabs. But the worst thing that's going to happen in 2 weeks, 2 million tonnes of toxic polluted waste is going to be dredged out of the Tees Bay for the new Freeport that we are against, dumped into the North Sea, and there's no going back. You can't cover it up. You can't take it out. And when the North Sea is finished of crabs and lobsters, that's it. We're out of a job, totally.
Wow. And the dredging, Pat, just to be clear, the dredging was just for the new Freeport? I heard it was to do with wind turbines as well. What's it for?
It's for the new... What it is, it's for the Freeport, for the new turbines to go to Dogger Bank. We've got nothing against that. Nothing against levelling up. We're not against that. But we want this done right. If it's polluted waste that's killed all these crustaceans, take it to landfill. Don't kill our industry. We've done it all our life. It's all we've got. Why? It's not just for lobsters. I'm in touch with Sally from the Seal Sanctuary. There's dead seals washed up, porpoises. Last November, thousands of guillemots were died. Something's killing these animals.
Pat, I tell you what, this is a story that deserves a bit more time than we've been able to give it this afternoon. I'd like to get you back if possible to talk about it some more, but for now, thanks very much indeed. We'll leave it there. Food and Rural Affairs, the Department of, claims the deaths are not due to chemical pollution. We need to state that. That's what they're saying. Michelle Dewberry's up next. What's she got for us, Michelle?
Being a Yorkshire girl, about the lobsters there, I was glued to it. I almost forgot to tell you what I had coming up, but thanks for the prompt. Ambulance times, one of the highest response times that we've had in 5 years. We'll be looking into why. Levi Bellfield, the serial killer, he wants to get married whilst he's in prison. I wouldn't have any of that if I was in charge. Also, Parliament, you might have seen Boris Johnson, they were up in Stoke-on-Trent. It got me thinking. Parliament needs to be refurbed soon. Why don't we move the whole thing up north whilst it happens? Also, periods. Oh, we don't talk about those often. In Spain, they're now looking at introducing 3 days off a month for women if they're struggling. I'll have that and a bit more at 6, Colin.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Looking forward to that. My thanks to Harry Mount, who's been our studio guest today. We'll have him back, I think that's for sure. Michelle Juber's next.
Good afternoon, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Tomorrow promises hazy sunshine for the vast majority, a warmer day as well, but it won't be completely dry everywhere. There will be some patchy rain across northern Scotland thanks to a set of weather fronts that are just draping their way southwards. Now they've already brought some rain through the day today and it'll continue to track southwards across Scotland and Northern Ireland this evening. So a little bit of rain in places, maybe even a few showers cropping up through the evening over northern England and as far south as North Wales, possibly even the Midlands. But it all tends to scoot away and across the south it generally does stay dry overnight. Temperatures holding up as well. Reasonably warm night compared to recent nights, double digits in most urban areas. On to the details then for Friday, and another set of weather fronts will bring more rain to the northwest. Quite a wet day over the northern parts of the Highlands and pushing up across the Northern Isles. But through the central belt of Scotland, largely dry, a fine day for Northern Ireland, certainly for most of England and Wales. A cracking day, if you like, sunshine. May start a little hazy, but plenty of blue sky by the afternoon. A bit more of a breeze blowing. It will be quite windy in northern Scotland as well. Quite a cool feel here, but elsewhere, a warmer day, more widely up into the high teens or the low 20s. 23 is possible across the southeast. Heading out on Friday evening, again, most places staying dry and fine. Just maybe 1 or 2 showers continuing over northwest Scotland. And they'll still maybe be around first thing on Saturday. It'll be a colder start. Temperatures well down into single figures on Saturday morning. But then a lovely day, again, if you like, blue sky and sunshine. A cracking day, in fact, with temperatures up into the high teens, low 20s more widely in parts of eastern England, 23, 24 degrees Celsius. Notice, however, cloud will be increasing across southern England with the threat of some thundery showers coming up from France and affecting the Channel Islands. And they don't stop there. They're likely to drift north on Saturday night. Hit and miss, but bringing some heavy showers across England and Wales on Sunday.